having started a band, you wouldn't want to see it go down the drain, so to speak. And I was so grateful that Robert Redhead came along, and now Brian Burdett. And obviously this band is in good hands. And I'm grateful to both of those gentlemen. And who knows what the future holds. But I do thank them very much indeed. The next number, incidentally, I was a bit put off a moment ago when the bandmaster said that good music doesn't need introduction, because the introduction to the next one is the longest introduction you ever heard. I came from a corps called Southall Citadel, where I met my wife, and my parents were stationed there when I was a very small boy, and I moved away and came back again some years later. When I was a very small boy, my wife was there. I think she was about 4 or 5, and she was in the Sunbeams. Anyone know what the Sunbeams were? Yeah, well, that shows your age somewhere. Anyway, the Sunbeams, she was in the Sunbeams, and once a year we used to have a special do on St. George's Day when we had the Union Jack put up, and all the Scouts and the Guards and the Sunbeams did a special item. And I can remember her in the Sunbeams marching up the centre of the hall, which had been cleared for the purpose, and the Sunbeam leader shouting, "Company, left turn!" And she turned to the right. I thought to myself then, there's a girl with a mind of her own. And I put her name in my book. And a few years later went back and married her. Well, Southall was a marvellous place, a great old corps. And on a Sunday afternoon, we used to have sometimes what was known as the How Do You Do meeting. This was if the officer didn't know quite what else to do, so it would fill in an hour very comfortably. What actually, anyone ever been to a How Do You Do meeting? Oh, there's a few. Good, well, you know now I'm telling the truth. The How Do You Do meeting began with the captain coming to the front, and he would lead a chorus and then call upon someone in the congregation to give their testimony. They would get up and give theirs, and then when they'd finished, they would call upon somebody else to give their testimony, who in turn, when they'd done their bit, called upon somebody else to give their testimony. That took a whole hour. Sounds very boring, but it was a very entertaining hour, as a matter of fact. It was amazing what you could learn about the corps in the How Do You Do meeting. The people who thought it was time for a new bandmaster. They never actually said, but you could tell by the way they're... And the person who hoped that the general change would soon come and the officer would be appointed somewhere else was never said in quite as blatant terms as that, but we all knew what they meant. Well, what used to happen was some of the testimonies would be pompous, some of them would be simple, and occasionally one person would call out a name, and 2 people might get up because they mistook the name. For instance, someone said, "How do you do, Brother Smith?" And Sister McTavish got up. You can understand. I mean, after all, McTavish sounds like Smith. And if you're all het up and sort of wondering if you should get up or not, that's very understandable. So that used to happen, and quite frequently. When we were in the band, we boys in the band learned very early on that it was a very good way to get a date with one of the songsters. According to the way you said, "How do you do, sister," whoever it was, and their response, you knew whether you'd made it or whether you'd better start looking somewhere else if the evening wasn't going to be a complete loss. I remember we had a girl in the corps called Cynthia. She was known as Sin for short. And she would jump up quite frequently and decide whether it was worthwhile bothering or not. We used to have an older lady sat towards the front. She was a bit deaf, so she got up lots of times because she kept thinking it must be her name. So that's the best thing to do, is to keep on getting up. Well, now, when I was thinking about something for the band, I thought about the old-fashioned how do you do meeting and how we could possibly reenact it. And so we're going to do just that. You'll find in places some of the testimonies are a bit pompous. I'm going to be the captain who starts the thing off and call upon the first one, and they'll call upon each other to give their testimonies. It's hard to remember who represented who, but I do remember that the flugelhorn player was supposed to be the little old lady at the front. And when I look at the flugelhorn player, I must say, he doesn't look quite like the old lady as the other flugelhorn player we had when I was here. It was never hard to, well, I think I better stop and get on with the piece. The piece is called Just Like John, and here it is.